How's it going, everyone? And welcome to the latest episode of the Why the Mountains podcast with me, your host, Stephen Farley. If you are a hill walker or a mountaineer, or just someone with a love of stories of adventure in the mountains, this is the podcast for you. In this first series, we are exploring the history of Irish mountaineers on Everest, from the earliest pioneering days right up to the latest commercial expeditions. If you haven't listened to our earlier podcasts, I suggest you do that first, before continuing this latest episode. This is the third in a 4-part mini-series of podcasts on Pat Falvey, one of Ireland's premier mountaineers, where we hear more from Pat on his adventures, taking him all over the world in pursuit of the 7 summits, and of course, back to Everest. We begin this episode by asking Pat, on his first trip to the north side of Everest, what was base camp like, and how do you begin to go about the business of climbing the mountain?
Well, the first thing we had to do was relax, become part of the environment, and we spent a few days there. Then the next thing is we started load carrying. And, in the early days, we used to load carrying ourselves with the Sherpas, and we used to also do a lot of the fixed roping. So it took us probably 4 or 5 trips up and down, like onto advanced base camp on the Magic Glacier, then onto base camp, and then like relax there, come back down. So there was a constant switchback going up and down, up and down, up and down. And even on that expedition, we lost a couple of our team due to the fact they couldn't hack the altitude. Because altitude is a different thing altogether. And there's one thing about acclimatization, but if it's a case you're anxious, and I always say that to people, if you're going on an expedition, don't think about the altitude before you go, because you're probably going to get altitude sickness. You are what you think a lot of the time. Just go and try it. And then for 80% of the people, there's a process. You know what I mean? They can acclimatize. So don't be afraid of acclimatizing. And it was, I suppose, the first time for me to be part of an international team. I started getting to know the people. And again, one of the things I always do, and I would do notoriety for, is singing. So we'd have a lot of good sing-songs and storytelling. And I suppose initially that's one of the reasons why I was brought along, because it was a hopscotch of, serious to gregarious to half comedians to people like that were just totally focused. So we had to have a kind of a balance. And it's where I got my kind of first introduction to the people all around the world, came here to follow that dream of climbing Everest. So like there was, as I said, Poles, Koreans, Chinese, Indians, like in different teams, right? There was about 6 teams. It wasn't like it was now. There was about 6 teams on the mountain, and we had very social base camps. And that's what I loved about it. So when I got to advanced base camp, it was just a total joy just to be there. Like, you know what I mean? I didn't even think of the summit. The summit was the focus, but I was eating the elephant. Mm. And the one thing is that I thoroughly enjoy eating an elephant. It's like, when you have your dinner and you're satisfied, you go, yeah, that's good. So like everything I was doing, like, yeah, that's good. That's good. And then it was like, okay, let's consolidate. And then move to the next one. And then the fascination came, right, when we were, like going for the North Col, like completely avalanche prone, and then it heightened the tension, like the attention to detail. And I couldn't believe it. I was going so well, like up to 23,000 feet at the time, I think. And then it was like, yeah, I'm sailing up and down, like, and I just couldn't believe it. So now I became very comfortable, at the North Col, and then looking around, and there was only a few tents there, like, as you will see, like from the pictures in the hall. And at this stage, we had Nish Bruce, who was going to try to jump out of the border of space. Was on a project from NASA, and Harry Taylor, like, was going to be the filmmaker, and sponsored, I think, by Disney at the time. And then, like, Nish was going to jump out of the border of space like a supersonic jet come through the sky, and Harry was going to jump out somewhere at about 120,000 film in passing. Right. So there was hugely interesting projects, and we were being brought into this, like, by Karl Heinz, the astronaut. So it was opening up a whole carter of new knowledge. Like, my interest in the Antarctic came from talking to Karl, because his next project was to go, but Karl died, was to go to Antarctic to bring a telescope. And that kind of opened up my interest in Antarctica. So, yeah, and it, like, could I say it was hard? I can't. Like, they used to call me the little donkey, which meant like I was a person that you could just load up. Like, and it's like the Duracell bunny, like, switch the clock and the bunny is off. So I happen to be very lucky I had those qualities. And I also had the qualities like that, I always anticipated fear, that it was 80% perceived. So until I hit the part where the fear was, to the extent it became into the 20%, I wasn't going to worry about it.
Yeah.
I'd worry about it when I have to worry about it. And again, like, I suppose that came from growing up where I grew up. It's about the aspect of resilience. So when you have all those qualities and the love of it, I loved everything. I loved the Round Glacier. I loved going into Lhasa. I just loved every single move that I made as I was making my way towards my objective. It wasn't the objective that blew my mind away, but it was the journey. And so, like, when you're talking about Everest, it was from the time I left Ireland to hit Kathmandu, like, to go on the Magic Highway, like, up into Neelam, crossing, seeing, go from Tibet, from Nepal to Tibet, seeing the Tibetans, seeing the difference in culture, and then making your way on the mountain. Because, like, lots of people might say, like, what's it like? And we start at base camp. We don't. We start in Ireland, or we start in wherever we come from, and it's the journey. And along the way, you meet these amazing people, and people with a passion. And that's what I'll always remember. The climbing never seemed hard to me.
Pat was making great progress up the mountain, but tragedy was never far away, and the death of Karl Heinz, an American scientist, astronomer, and astronaut who had been part of the support crew for the Apollo 15 mission to the moon and had flown on the Space Shuttle Challenger, and who was now part of a 4-man team carrying out research on the mountain, affected all of the team members.
The disappointment came when Karl got pulmonary edema and cerebral edema, and then we had to bury him in the icy glacier. And I never forget bringing him down what I call the Magic Highway, and we got down to advanced base camp, and we went to sleep, and during the night Karl died. And then we had to do a post-mortem on him there and then. From an insurance point of view, Dr. Ken was with us, so, like, we did that, and I remember recording it, and because, like, I was kind of the filmmaker, or the film, shooting the films and things like that, and that was very traumatic. But what always amazed me about it, even though we buried him, we went back up, and, like, some people would say, like, how could you do that? It didn't seem, we shouldn't do it, right? No, and when I think of it afterwards, if someone said, God, it's not very cruel. It's like that we were there, this is what we were there to do, and we did it. And sometimes I would question myself in relation to, should we not have just gone home? And, like, when I did the summit, the film and the book, it was a question, like, if they had turned after the first body had died, would any more have died? So I came, like, from 18 reaching the summit to 11 dying, to 1 should have died, if it's a case they stuck to the rules. So I'd often question myself sometimes, like, what would happen if we all had died after going back up? And then, like, people would have a different story about, like, how careless we were, how stupid we were to do it. And what happens, I said to people, like, if you're not there, like, Jerry McDonald used to have a great saying. He said, at the end of the day, when there is no answer, it's only the mountain knows. Like, he died on K2. One of my very, very good buddies that I would have been mentoring at the time, and he came here and came on an expedition, one of the most amazing climbers I'd ever seen, right? And all of those affect you. But To me, the mountain is the mountain. To me, the enjoyment is the journey. To me, when I got to the high camp to go for the summit and Carl was dying, I had to come back down. Right? It's because of the fact, it was in respect to my friend, he needed a rescue evacuation. So what it taught me there is that, you know, it's important to have empathy, and it's also important to actually give up on your goals when it comes to life. And so many people don't do that. Like we say, green boots or lots of the stuff that people that know the likes of Everest will have heard about and can be highly critical of it if they wish to be. But again, I would say it's only the mountain knows what's happening, and you'd have to go into what happened in a lot of those cases.
Only the mountain knows what's happening. In the case of Pat's first trip to Everest, it was expedition leader John Tinker who knew what was happening and who was making the choices about who from the team would be going for the summit. John Tinker, a mountaineer from York in England, took over leadership of the team after Mark Miller, another English climber who was meant to be leading the expedition, was tragically killed in a plane crash on the 26th of September 1992. The plane crashing into a mountain just shortly before it was due to land at Kathmandu airport. Pat was happy with Tinker's credentials and with him taking up the position of leader of the expedition. I asked Pat how he felt when John made the crucial decisions about the summit teams.
Well, the thing was, I was disappointed initially, right, because I was actually picked to go to the summit, and then John switched to him going to the summit. Like there was a process, and the process was fair. But then John, for one reason or another, he would have said himself afterwards, because he was the leader and he felt that he should, that it took me out of my position of going with Magic Berbica, who had been my mentor and who had been my partner for all that length of time. So what happened is, and it could have been very different if Carl hadn't died, you know. So I was supposed to be in the position for the first drive to the summit with Angbabu Jerry, with Magic Berbica and myself. And then he went. And it was all of a sudden, like when we were heading for, the high camp and summit. So I was kind of perturbed, but in one way at the time I didn't mind, because I said, okay, I get a shot, the next day. But sadly enough, Carl got sick. We came down and it blew my summit attempt. So was there a bit of disgruntlement afterwards? There was, definitely. Then John apologised. And he came back and he said, look, if I'm coming back, I'll be back next year. And what I'll do is I'll put you on the team. And literally it was going to be free gratis. So whereas a lot of people got very upset about it. And then I felt to myself, well, maybe I wouldn't have got to this. See, you have to convince yourself, if you want to move on, that, it's okay. And, I say lots of this to people like in expedition life. And indeed, it's about actually anxiety as well. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be angry. It's okay, to lose your head for a point, but it's not okay not to be okay all the time. So what happens with lots of people, they get buried in this thing of, anger and hurt. And again, it's coming back to, again, my early mentors. The philosophy is, Pat, it's okay not to be okay. So fucking roar and shout, fuck people out of it if it's against you have to, but don't keep it up. Burn it out of yourself. And I remember one time I went down to Zanzibar to a tribal thing, right? And every year they have what I call bait the shit out of each other, right? Yeah. And what they do is they go with banana, the banana trees, and they get into a field. This is a whole tribe of people, and they go around for about 2 hours and they bait the shit out of each other. And it's long ago, we used to have bait the hunger out. I don't know whether you remember that in New Year.
No.
My grandmother, because of the fact we were poor, she'd get a sliced pan, and at 12 o'clock at midnight, she'd fire. We'd keep firing until the bread broke up into bits, right? Because bait out the hunger. And I always remember that. And I always remember the fact is, I suppose after going through that my mental kind of breakdown in the initial years, that it was learning that it's okay, Pat, not to be okay. It's okay,
Mhm.
but not to be okay. Not to be okay all of the time is a problem.
Mm.
And that's where you have to actually come in. So I was not okay for probably about a week. The people on the mountain were a hell of a lot more upset for longer than I was. And then I started saying, look, I'll be back. It was my first time in there anyway, but I wasn't going to give up. And this is about not quitting. Too many people quit too easily. There's a great saying like, when times go tough as they sometimes will, and the road you're trudging seems all uphill, when funds are low and debts are highest, then you must not quit. Success is failure turned inside out with a silver tint of cloud of doubt. You can never tell how close you are. It may seem far, but be so near. So stick to the fight, lads, when your heart is hit. It's when times go tough that you must not quit. So here I was close to the mother lode, and I had to turn back. But I didn't quit. And then I went back, and what happened? I got there. And I wasn't resentful then, like, about the fact that, I put it down to the fact that maybe I wouldn't have got there anyway. But I knew I could get there.
I get the sense that there is no way Pat would quit at anything. Pat just seems able to not dwell on too much for too long, and is able to move on to the next thing, the next task. Something that doesn't chime with my own life, as I can dwell too much and sweat the small stuff, as they say. I asked Pat if this was an accurate portrayal.
Yeah, it would be. I've had lots of ups and downs in my life. It's not all about success, it's about failure as well, but it's about the learning from the failure, and it's about taking the lessons from the failure. So, like, people say to me, how have I been so successful? Number one, I've been so successful because I've been so long at it. But I also didn't give up while I was at it. So, like, no matter which way you go, if you keep at something dog-headedly, like, you will succeed, at what you're doing. And in particular, like, if you learn from your mistakes. So that's basically it. But Everest 1993 was an amazing expedition with an amazing group of people that taught me about life and about how all these different nationalities that had all these different complexities about them. We rose above everything, politics and religious divides, and we worked as one to achieve a common goal. And that's the way it should be.
Keep at something dog-headedly and you will succeed. A message from Pat I have tried to remember time and time again putting this podcast series together, when it was easier to watch another episode of something on TV. This ability to be dog-headed would serve Pat well, not only in his return to Everest, but in his next endeavour, the 7 Summits. I asked him where this idea had come from.
How come? Of course, lots of people would have said it was a tick list that Pat Falvey wanted to go on. There was nothing in the source. What happened is I met people like from Russia, from South America, from Australia, from people every corner of the planet that was on that mountain. And I just was totally buzzed with the fact of what drove them. And then, like, people would, like, I'm a businessman, right? There's no getting away with it. Like, I was broke, but I'm a business head. So I wanted to go and see all these tribes and places. So I couldn't believe it, like, when someone said the 7 Summits. And I said, fuck, where's it going to take me? North America, South America, Asia, Africa, Antarctica, like, to all the continents. And I said, God, this would be a great way to get to meet all my friends again. And I also knew that it would be, it hadn't been done, so therefore it was an opportunity that would give me the ability to rise profile. And what I didn't realize now at the end of the day is I would become the first person in the world to have done Everest North and South, 7 Summits twice, and then move on to the Antarctic when we started this. But it all started with the dream and the goal to meet all these people, see all these tribes, the Aborigine, the Maori, the Inuit, like the Indians, the and actually expand my mind, because I was now buzzing with curiosity at this point in time, because I was a workaholic, like up to when I came from a poor background, so we didn't travel. Then, like, it was like I was in this council house looking out the window at Cork Airport, never thinking I'd get on a plane. And next time, buzzing around the world. And it's like this dream that I now had was giving me the opportunity to see it. And was I worried about doing the 7 summits? No, like that wasn't perceivably the initial goal. It was actually to see the world.
Taking on the challenge of the 7 summits is one sure way to see the world. But as Pat explains, it was about more than just the mountains. It was the places, the people, and of course, the experience and the adventure.
So I didn't alone, like, say, when I was going down to, say, Australia or onto West Papua New Guinea, it was actually that I put a project together to do a project with the Maori and the Aborigine. When I was going to North America, I did a project like with the Inuits. When I was going to Russia, it was that I had a fascination about the Central Caucasus and about the war-torn Caucasus. And then, like, to see, like, how Stalin and, those, like, to learn the history. Like, it brought me to Moscow, St. Petersburg. So I was learning the history, and it happened that I got the accreditation for climbing mountains as well. And, like, was it hard? No, it wasn't. It was actually enjoyable. And, like, what people say about climbing mountains are they're hard. Like, if I said to an accountant, is accountancy hard? He'd say, no, it's accountancy. But if you ask a bookkeeper, is accountancy hard? They'd probably say it's very hard. So, like, I was trained well. I had a passion for climbing. The routes that we were doing, and I suppose one of the resentments that I took is that Pat Falvey is doing a bucket list, but they never understood why I was doing it. And then they were saying, oh, he's not doing anything hard. And then, like, no matter what you do, I walked across Antarctica. I skied across Greenland. Like, I've been to lots of remote, like, I've crossed deserts, right? But of course, at the time, what was happening is, and I can understand it, like, that these people then said, oh, this is only a tick list, right? But tick list or no tick list, I'm entitled to do what the fuck I like. But it wasn't why they were thinking I was doing it. It was completely different altogether. It was for the passion and the desire to travel and to meet up with other people. And it happened that I got huge publicity for it. Probably for the wrong reason.
I don't think Pat is a man to shy away from publicity, and he was certainly gaining a lot of it through his attempt on Everest and his subsequent quest to climb the 7 summits. The 7 summits, the highest mountain on each continent. In Asia, Mount Everest in Nepal. In Europe, it is Mount Elbrus in Russia. Kilimanjaro in Africa. Aconcagua in South America. And Mount Vinson in Antarctica. And depending on which version of the 7 summits you are focusing on, either Mount Kusiko in Australia or Carsten's Pyramid on the island of New Guinea. But probably the hardest of the 7, outside of Everest, is Denali, also known as Mount McKinley, the highest mountain in North America, in Alaska. I asked Pat about this peak.
Denali, Mount McKinley, the white one, the cold one, it's because of where it's situated is its altitude feels higher than what it is. Is it cold? Yes, it is. I've climbed it a few times. And Denali, like, I would say, is exciting. It has crevasses that you could swallow a bus in. It has head walls, like, which you could have avalanches on. Was the technicality hard? No, it wasn't. But I never forget, like, that we got caught for 5 days in a storm. The only thing I remember about Denali was we sang at the high camp, like, with all the different nationalities. We were digging out snow. And we were really enjoying, like, even being there. The only thing I hated about it was that we ran out of food and all I could eat was porridge and rice. So I never ate porridge and rice for, I'd say, about 7 years after that, because, like, it was literally chewing, like, the porridge and the rice to the point of view you nearly puke. But then, like, the climb itself was absolutely fantastic. and I climbed it with my friend. I was actually invited on that one by Mick Murphy, who had climbed Ama de Blanc. And Mick was only here. Like, and what I love about this is, in all that has happened, like, the friends that we've made always stick together. We might have had arguments and things like that, but it's the bond that these expeditions create. So like Alaska was amazing. Like, and like when I think of Alaska, it's not the mountain again. It's what we did in Alaska. I remember one time at latitude 52, I was there and we were drinking all night. And just a story, I went to the bar and we all had got back and I owed me 10 pitchers of beer. And they say, like, in Alaska, there's very few women. Do you know that?
I didn't know it.
Oh, yeah, very few women. Like, about 1 in 10, like, is the thing. So they say, ladies, if you're looking for a man, go to Alaska, where the odds are good, but the goods are odd. So anyway, just giving you a story about that. I went up to the bar and I ordered 10 pitcher, and it was making Con Collins and Phil O'Flynn, and they were all down, like, waiting for their pints. And I happened to go stand alongside of this one woman that was at the bar, and I said, hi, how are you? And what happened is she said, great. And I said, where are you from? She was ex-New York. And next, this big guy came from behind me, caught me by the scruff of the thing, pulled me up onto my toes. And he says, hey, you man, that's my fucking woman. Leave her alone. Right? And I'm like, this, like, it's like an eagle now has caught me, like, and caught a fish. And then I said, I'm from Ireland. That's what I said. And he left me down. He said, I'm in the Klondike with somebody, right? So like that, he kind of forgot the fact I was chatting to his woman. But then Con Collins, who's a very good friend of mine and my partner at the time, comes over, and he's small, and he got the pictures. He says to one, hello, how are you? Your man caught me by the scruff of the neck, pulled me up into the air, and said the same thing, tell your friend, leave my woman alone. So it's the experience. Another night, like, we were there and, like, at the pub, there was a guy, like, with a big beard who was the trapper, went out the door, and it's the land of the midnight sun, so we were there drinking it till the early morning. It's not that we were alcoholics or anything like that, but we were having fun. Like, we liked our pints. And then this guy crossed the road, and anyone that had been there at the time would have known where it was, and he sat into a crapped-out plane that had rusted with the door. He set across the 2 seats, backed it out onto the main road, and flew off and said, I'll see you in another 6 months. So I think
Amazing place.
it's the stories. It's the story, it's the people, and it's the climb. So you can't, like, if you just combine the climb and you're just climbing for the sake of climbing, there is no fun. You have to actually take it as an experience. And if you fail, you have the story. It just happened, as my dad said, dream and dream big, but remember, the following of the dream is where the success lies, not in achieving it. Let achieving it be the bonus. So, like, always take the journey.
Pat's stories conjure up images of Alaska that truly fire the imagination and resonate with what he said earlier about climbing mountains being about more than just the mountain, but the people and the experience, and as his father said, the journey. However, this series is about Ireland and Everest, so I brought Pat back to the Himalaya, and he began to tell me about his next attempt on Everest in 1995.
Like, I was just having a great time, and it, like, yes, did I want to get to the summit? Of course, it was I driven to get to the summit? Yes, of course, but again, it was about the journey. And then we've met a whole new quartet of friends. It was like, at this stage, like, I would have had the likes of Nazim Maruki, the James Allens, the Mike Smiths. And on this stage, yes, we did go to the summit, and there was only 3 of us on our summit attempt together. Now, we did have a rescue on it. Mike got pulmonary and cerebral edema, like, at the second step on the way back. But things that's very memorable about it, it's like when James got to the summit, like, and he goes, like, I says, come on, we get out of here, right? So we're out of oxygen, and James says, I have to have a piss.
Okay.
Like, he seriously wanted to piss, like, but can you imagine having to piss on top of Everest?
I can't.
Yeah, so so at the end
Where you
of it, like, I remember another one, like, we were doing chow, and Gavin, I lent him my suit, but just before you go, like, you get all these cramps and things like that. So, like, I had a down suit because I had a spare one, and I gave it to him. But what he did is he just got a cramp just as we were to the summit, and he put down his pants and to have a shit. and he shit into the hood. So like, it's the story, like again, like it's like the summits are one part of it, but at the end of the day, like it's the experience, it's the people, it's the drive, it's the passion, it's the desire, it's where you are. Like you're crossing, like people say to me about Everest, what is it about Everest? Like people say, I got to the top of Everest. Like I not alone got to the top of Everest. I crossed the highest gangplank on planet Earth that once came from the bottom of the sea. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
The bottom of the world, the top of the sea, the bottom of the sea on top of the world. That's what actually I get out of it. That I've been in places that are absolutely amazing in the creation of our planet. That was 220 million years in the making. And I have a fossil out there that came from, 28,000 feet in the Death Zone at a height at which jetliners cruise. That's how I know it came from the bottom of the sea.
We are now getting to the crux of things, the attempt on the summit of Everest. I asked Pat to take us through it, but in typical Pat Falvey style, he cannot talk about this experience without again focusing on the people involved and the efforts of other people, including the critical support of the Sherpas and other members of the team in getting to the summit. Pat starts us off with the one word to describe how it felt to be so close and confident of success.
Exciting. And exciting to the part that you have to actually remember how I felt about being there. To me, it's Chomolungma, Goddess Mother of the Earth. It's not just Mount Everest. It is the highest point on planet Earth. And the fact that a guy that lived in a box room in Granabraher in Cork, that was a Nari, a derogatory statement for these poor people, was now be given the opportunity to cross the highest gangplank on planet Earth was amazing. I suppose at this stage, I become more tuned to high altitude. I wasn't afraid of high altitude. I knew I could deal with high altitude, so I was thoroughly enjoying the whole experience. In going to the summit, there's times you'd feel you want to give up, but again, that thing, don't quit, that verse I called a while ago, I thought about my the verse that my mum gave me about, don't forget, that it could be close and be so far. So I was ecstatic and always knew from my visualization that I was going to get to the summit. Never doubted myself in a minute. Never doubted the fact that I wouldn't get back. I had planned at this stage. I knew where everybody had died, everybody had lived, everybody that got to the summit. I had done my planning right, and it would be misfortunate, but it could happen that Pat Falvey wouldn't be back and wouldn't have succeeded. I knew the team I was going with. I knew at this stage I was a far wiser mountaineer, so I wouldn't let what happened in previous year actually affect me in any way, and I would be a lot more dogmatic if it's a case that something like that happened. So, wisdom is only a thing that comes by experience. And now there was an amazing team of Sherpa. There was Angba Buchiri, there was Larpa, there was, we just had a great team. And we had a team that laughed and sang and told jokes and, kind of had good banter with each other, and we could take critical, constructive criticism in relation to what was going wrong, and nobody actually took offense. And when it came to picking the teams to go to the summit, there was a very clear criteria. So the communication was good. So at that stage, I thoroughly enjoyed every minute of it, from going up the Magic Highway to, to base camp. There's not a thing that I would have not enjoyed that time. And I got to meet, I got to Alison Hargrave. Then I started getting to know 7 Year Henry, and all of the big names, the different names on the mountain, Russell Bryce. And then I started to get, which I was amazed, respect from them, which in turn bullied me on again.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that's important to me. It was very important that I was a self-professed person with a talent. I wasn't just being guided. I had a decision-making process at this stage that made it hugely important to me. You know, we used to come down here and arguments in Moriarty's place was called the Mountain Man. We had people coming in from all around the world, like Steve Venables, like Paul Pritchard, and the conversations that goes on about those fuckers, like, you know, that have no talent, like, and they're being hauled up Everest. So, like, I knew I would be in for critical acclaim, like, with the people I was even hanging out with, if it's a case it went wrong. So I was now happy and content that, you know, if someone said to me something, I could say to them, look, man, it's none of my business what you think. And you have to learn that. It's none of your business what other people think about you. Because what it'll do is it'll take the good out of it for you. And it'll take you down. And I've actually mentored and coached Olympians, football teams, rugby teams. And it's the one thing I actually bring into it all the time. It's none of your business what your supporters think of you or what anyone else think of you. It's, are you doing your best?
I don't think Pat worries too much about what other people think of him, but the respect from fellow mountaineers was clearly important. He knew he had a talent for the high mountains and wanted to ensure that he used that talent and ability to achieve his goal of Everest. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of this episode, but please do join us next week for the final episode in this mini-series on Pat Falvey, where we finally get to hear what it was like to summit Mount Everest and achieve this goal that Pat had set for himself many years earlier on Mangerton. You said you enjoyed every step of the way. Did you enjoy the second step?
Yeah, totally.
There's a great description in the book of
How James lost his two fingers as
but
well.
even the abyss below you as you're making your way onto the ladder. What was that like?
It was amazing. It was just totally amazing. It was like, this is where history was made. This is where Mary and Irvin, did they fall or did they not fall? This is where we're going to go out onto the top ridge, like, and go to the step 3 and then onto the summit, which was the size of a snooker table or a table like 5.5 miles up in the sky. And we were here. Remember, this is the first time. And as we approached and crossed that traverse and then came to this ladder that was put up by the Chinese, and I never forget getting onto the ladder, and as I got onto the ladder, like there was a part of it loose and it was shaking. And then when I looked below me, there was a guy who fell the previous year, 2 years previous, and I could see him below us. And then I got out getting onto the top one and then calling to my partner, James Allen, who became the youngest in the world at the time to have climbed Everest. He was 21. And I looking down, I said, come on, James. Then he's actually making his way up the ladder and he's kind of nervous. And then he gets to the point, there's an amazing point there where you have to let go of the ladder and come across onto a small step. And then you're up onto the top of the second step. And then it's like, he's there and he won't make the move. Because as he was standing below, a block came down and just passed him the size of a bloody television. And then like when he looked down, he's seen the body below. So he was a bit nervous. And so then when he was coming up, he said, I can't make the move. And I'm going like, fuck, we're after coming to this point. Like, we're just up there. We're on the summit. And then he said, like, I can't make the move. He said, I'm going to go down. And I goes, what the fuck? You can't go down. And then I said, for Christ's sake, will you make the move? And he said, we agreed, like, if I can't make it, I'm going to go down, right? So I sadly turned away my back on the second step as he was about to go down. And myself and Mike continued on to the third step. But as I was going to the third step, I looked behind, and there he was. He had made the move. But in the move, just to tell you, he took off his gloves to make the moves up at those steps. Later, he was to lose 2 fingers. Right. So, and then, like, as I said, like, getting to the summit was absolutely amazing because it was like, and I know people that stood there would say the same thing. Like, for me, there was a huge pride about what my grandmother bait into me. If you think you can, you will. If you think you can't, you won't. What my dad said, dream and dream big, collect the bonus. We were collecting the bonus, right? And then we're standing in this amazing place on top of the world. And at that stage, I was so proud. And probably the controversy came in here now that I put my hand in my pocket. I took out the tricolour, put it on the summit of the ice axe, flung it high in the air and said, yes, I'm standing on top of the fucking world. And that was later to be interpreted that I denigrated and I was claiming to be the first Irish person.
Yeah. The noise coming from outside again.
Noise coming, not Dawson, not anybody like, in the main fraternity, but it is used as a politically divisive situation. And that's what happened at the time. But I never thought of it that way.